you're lucky enough to do is stand across some of the best pitching coaches in the country and talk about philosophies and how they utilize tech to develop velocity and how they maximize their guys to translate it onto the field. So when we talk about the overall, pitching velocity conversation and kind of what you maybe have learned over your time of standing across from really smart people, what are the few takeaways that you think everybody should know about the velocity conversation?
That's a great question. A broad one. And I don't know which way I want to take it really. So for one, I think what we have to understand and what I've obviously learning through experience and learning from all the great minds that we get to talk to, like you said, is we've come so far in velocity development. Um, we know so much more, just like everything kind of in the game. We have so much more information. And I think the important thing that people need to understand is it's not like 25, 30, 40 years ago, going back into the 80s, we didn't know that velocity was good or we didn't have guys that threw hard. I think the fact that the information is at our fingertips so quickly and the adjustments can be made so much quicker, paired with the fact that as we've evolved as humans, the athletes are better and the athletes are better than they've ever been, especially when that comes to the pitching side of things. You said it before we started recording that the debate between radar guns, about, there are people out there who think that we aren't actually throwing harder, we just read it differently, is the dumbest argument in baseball. Like, I just don't like that argument at all. Like, people throw harder because we're better athletes, we're bigger, we're faster, we're stronger, we know more about ground force. Obviously, we have things like Newt force mounds. We know more about biomechanics. We have markerless markerless biomechanic capturing capabilities. We understand spin rate more. And by spin rate, I don't mean higher is better. I just mean we understand what it does and how to manipulate it more because we have things like edgertronic cameras. We have things like TrackMan that can give us the data. And when you get it instantly, it allows you to make adjustments in real time, which then allows you to shorten the development window, meaning get better quicker. And to me, so leading all of that to answer your question, I think the biggest takeaway I've had is pretty much everyone knows how to do this now, and everyone is doing it. So velocity is still extremely important because what velocity does in baseball is it shrinks your margin for error, right? The less time a hitter has to react, the less refined you need to be in everything else, right? The little bit less movement you can have, um, the little bit less command you can have. Now you still have to put it in the zone, but you can get away with throwing the ball in the fatter parts of the plates instead of working the corners. Guys who throw softer have to be able to manipulate the baseball more, have to be able to command it a little bit better because the chance of getting barreled up when you have more time to react is higher, right? And obviously everything changes as you go up in levels. But the biggest takeaway for me is we better figure out other ways to get guys out other than, oh, you just throw really hard, because everyone can do it. You're not separating yourself anymore if you just throw really hard. If you go back to Aroldis Chapman's debut, him throwing 103, 104 miles an hour in a Major League Baseball setting was unheard of. Hitters weren't seeing it. He was going to separate himself. He was going to be considered one of the best because he could just throw a fastball really, really hard. I remember him coming up not having any other pitches. Like, it was a fastball. Everything else stunk. It was terrible. Fast forward, as everyone else has now called on with people with like Driveline, Tread, companies, and really smart people, BPZ up in South Jersey. There's so many across the country, right? Tons of people that are fantastic. The guys out in St. Louis, obviously the Newt Force guys that we work with. People know how to train that stuff. Aroldis Chapman had to start throwing better secondary offerings. So to me, the biggest takeaway is going to these places, going to Dallas Baptist, going to the University of Georgia, going to Arkansas, going to Arizona. They can all develop a guy to throw hard. So now we have to find the margins. We have to attack the margins and figure out how we can get them to be more well-rounded pitchers. And I'm not saying there was ever really a point where you could only throw a fastball, if that makes sense. But velocity training, while still important, is one slice of the greater pie that's going to make a successful pitcher.
Well, I think the main thing is how much the hitting advancements have progressed over the last few years, that has not necessarily made velocity irrelevant because, like you said, it increases your margin for error. But the majority of hitters have now seen something or some semblance of the same velocity because while Aroldis Chapman was an outlier at the time, nobody did it. So that looked like 140, right? To those hitters. Like that was unfathomable that somebody threw that hard. Now we train at such a high level that becoming that last point of that well-rounded pitcher is even more important for guys.
And I think it's less so even like, yes, the training, you're absolutely right. Now guys get, like we talk to coaches all the time with things like the eye pitch and everything like they're getting 4 at bats off a starter before you even step in the box before the game starts. But how about the fact that like in game, let's take it at the college setting. You play in the SEC, you play on Friday night, you're seeing a guy that comes out and he's in the mid 90s to upper 90s. The 2 relievers that come in after him are in the 90s. The guy that closes the game is going to have nasty stuff in the 90s. So Saturday starter, your 95 isn't so cute anymore, right? It's not as special anymore. So even before the training, let's look at the fact that like every at bat you're taking essentially when you get to the level, that level of play, when you get to Division I college baseball, and then forget the major leagues. You got guys coming out of bullpen you never heard of in games where they're down by 10, pumping 97.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, this is their guy for when they're down by 8-9 runs in Major League Baseball coming out of the bullpen. This guy just got called up. He's got 17 innings, and we were talking about it. You turned on the College World Series this year. You watched LSU bring in a kid. I can't remember his name. I apologize. We're 2 months since that happened, but kid comes marching out of the bullpen. He's a transfer from a mid-major. He's got like 17 innings on the year, and he's throwing 94-mile-an-hour turbo sinkers. It's like, this is LSU's guy that has 17 innings on the year. So your 94 is a household thing. So again, yes, to your point, and add on to the fact that the training now, we're seeing high velocities in the cages every single day as hitters. The 94 mile an hour off the mound isn't going to surprise anyone anymore. That's just commonplace.
Yeah, 100%. And that allows it to be so much easier for those hitters to adjust. And again, I think that's the beauty of where the sport has come, where it is not just as simple as throw as hard as you can over the heart of the plate. I think there was a time and place maybe in the revolution where that was the priority. And I think even probably MLB organizations were just like, he throws hard, give him a roster spot, or he throws hard, draft him in the first round. That's an 80 grade fastball because it registers triple digits. And how far we've come in terms of understanding how truly to value a fastball and how truly different movement patterns of the pitch can impact where a 92, and I guess this is a more pitching development conversation than it is velocity development conversation, but my fascination recently has been Roki Sasaki as he's transitioned to the MLB in America. In the World Baseball Classic, he was 101, 102, right? But everybody knew it was a dead zone-ish heater, but he was able to get away with it because of the velocity that he'd had. He struggled last year in his last year in Japan. He's come over, and now the fastball is more 93 to 95, and he's getting punished at every level of professional baseball through his rehab assignment. And again, I'm sure command's a little off. I'm sure it's kind of fluky in some way, shape, or fashion, but it brought me back to a conversation that we had on here about Paul Skeens and his draft value, right? Because Paul had obviously 101 in the tank. He's a mutant human being. But the conversation around his fastball and is it truly an 80 grade? Is it truly going to translate to success at the next level? And I thought Sasaki's the more example of the opposite end, that can this guy succeed at 92? And why can't this guy succeed at 92 because of the fastball shape and how it portrays? Or is somebody going to be able to maintain that velocity long term? Like we still see guys like Jacob deGrom. We still see guys in the upper 90s that are older in age where maybe they can still have success with the velocity even if their shape isn't elite. So that's a long way of saying of how does pitch shape and movement profiles create more margin for error where maybe it's not all tied into the velocity development.
Yeah, and I think when you start talking about the big leagues, the whole conversation changes from college baseball, because in the big leagues the margin for error is so slim that like those guys that are in the box are freaks of nature. They don't care how hard you throw. If guys started throwing 150, I truly believe this. If guys started throwing 150 miles an hour,
Only 10% of the league could play Pepper
Yeah,
right
well,
now.
I knew you were gonna. I knew it. I was gonna avoid that. But if guys started throwing 150 miles an hour next year, hitters would figure out a way to start bailing it up, and you would still, the Aaron Judges of the world, Shohei Ohtani's, Bryce Harper, like those guys that are freaks in Major League Baseball, they would be like, fine, we just hit against 150 now. People would be really mad because strikeouts would rise even more. But I think, especially when you talk about it at the college game, that's where command becomes so important. And for me, like I feel like we were a little bit different going back to that Skeens draft year where you certainly were raising really good questions looking at the profile of the fastball, and just because it's 102, is it that good? And it was like, yeah, but he throws it into a Coke bottle. Like that's what makes it so. That's where it's crazy, where it was so Steven Strasburg-esque. And that's where I used to be like, this is where the comparisons are fair between Skeens as a college prospect and Strasburg, where it was like Strasburg was the best one we had seen in recent memory coming out of college. And where I agree with Skeens is like, because Strasburg used to be able to do the same thing. It was like glove side, arm side, up, down. Like he had every quadrant. And I think it's interesting listening to Caleb Cotham talk, who, I think is one of the best pitching coaches in all of baseball at any level, talk about like, sometimes in the development where we're at in the stages of development right now in baseball, we try and do too much and we get too special, where we have all of this stuff. And like, if you can command a pitch to a spot 100% of the time, you can be one of the best pitchers. So let's start there. And if you're going down into youth levels, like let's start there. If you can throw, and even height, let's take beyond youth, because youth, that's like learning proprioception and how to do all that. But like, let's take high school and into your early stages of your college career. If you can 100 like hit a fastball to one side of the plate and just dominate that, and every time you're going to be able to put it where you need to one quadrant, to one spot, start there and then build off of that. And I think that's where, when you start asking that question of like, can Roki Sasaki succeed, or can guys succeed at 92? It's like, yes, you just have to be able to command the baseball better. And then what I think you were leading into there is like manipulating it then. And I think the trend that we started to see is having multiple fastballs. Now, you look at the best pitchers in the game right now. Paul Skeens throws a four-seamer, and he throws that just ridiculous splinker thing, and he can command both. So now, back in the day, right, you used to be like, okay, well, we need speed adjustments. We need 10 miles an hour difference. Well, what if we can throw something similar velocities and have them have two different shapes? Now, if you throw a dead zone four-seamer, it's not a dead zone because you can also sink it. So now they're guarding against something that's the same velocity that's maybe sinking. And then if your four-seamer doesn't, play up in the zone or have elite characteristics as far as spin or kind of the way it looks to a hitter as rising, like if you can sink that at or around the same velocity, that fastball, the four-seamer, now becomes that much better because they're having to guard against both. Or if you can cut it, and sink it. And you see a guy like Zach Wheeler, who we'll see what he's kind of in a weird spot right now, obviously with the blood clot, but a guy like Zach Wheeler, what's made him so good in the second half of his career since he got to Philadelphia is he now, instead of just throwing 98 to 101 like he used to with the Mets, he's sinking his fastball. He has the four-seamer that he still can work up in the zone, and he cuts it. He's throwing three different fastballs that are all at or around the same velocity. So now you're having to protect pretty much every quadrant of the plate at one velocity. That's before we get into any secondary stuff.